This is a tradition that's going back about 20 years now, where the Greater London Authority wants to put on a big fireworks show and celebrate the New Year's. Okay, I'm skeptical about spending money on cultural issues, but fine, whatever. Okay. So the BBC recorded this and put it up on their Twitter account with watching the 2021 fireworks, and some people were upset about this year's. And if you can load up the next one, you can see Sadiq Khan's tweet, which London stands together against racism tonight and always. Hashtag Black Lives Matter at George the Poet. And you might be thinking, okay, whatever, he's going to tweet something stupid, to a video of the fireworks. Yeah, it's not just a tweet. We're going to play the fireworks now for the audience, and you can see why people might be a little bit weirded out by this celebration.
The future holds unexposed danger, but no stress. Humankind is no stranger to progress. And as we've proven, when we collaborate, progress follows fast.
This is one voice with one message. Black Lives Matter.
It's too cringe.
2020, a year we will never forget. But we can make the new year a year of hope.
I can't hear any sound because we're going through Discord, so if there's sound on it, I can't tell.
I've got to describe it for people listening anyway. But there's a quote from George the Poet, and then a big fist made out of drones all put together, and then the fist disperses into 5 different fists to be like, we're rising up. And then the voiceover from, I guess, someone from the BBC or played over the speakers is Black Lives Matter. So of course the
heroic.
Stunning and brave Sadiq Khan. You really pulling yourself out there, but probably one of the cringiest things I've ever seen. And there's a few problems with this. It wasn't just the Black Lives Matter thing. There are people upset about some of the other stuff that was displayed. So there was an abundance of use of EU colours, which might seem a bit conspiracy theorist, but he's done it before, and I'll mention that in a minute. The drones also represented themselves into the NHS symbol with a big love heart to celebrate the NHS. Okay, maybe you could be happy, any other year this would be political, but this year with the coronavirus, maybe we should celebrate them.
Which has made it expressly political.
Yeah, but I would say that's actually done the opposite. It's very much made it a political issue. Then you get BLM, and then it turns into a turtle with an image of the world as its back, with a quote from David Attenborough about how we can make the next year the best year for the planet and all the rest of it. So, yeah, touching on a bunch of issues which are political, whether you like them or not. Maybe you're supportive of what was shown, maybe you're not supportive. But the point is there's a divide there. And this is not what this celebration is meant to be about. And
just to nail this down, this is expressly political, deliberately partisan. Black Lives Matter being a neo-Marxist movement founded by Marxists that is trying to create an issue an issue of race conflict that actually doesn't exist here or didn't prior exist here, and is not justified through the data that we have that police are being excessively violent to black people. That just doesn't hold up. Actually, the data goes the other way and suggests that police are excessively violent to white people in the UK. So, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to stress this.
No, you're absolutely right.
Without legitimacy in the United Kingdom.
But of course, not to speak of anything in the United States, but the reason it's so cringe, especially in Britain, is because it's a narrative from the United States of the history and the statistics of the United States being brought into Britain without any attempt at translation. Like, all of the slogans are the same, all the talking points are the same, even though obviously no one's checked to see if any of the statistics or actions back it up. So it's.
And the most embarrassing thing about it is, but George Floyd. Who the hell's George Floyd? He's some guy who died 10,000 miles away in America. Like, what do you even expect our representatives to do about that scenario? Well, there's nothing to do with us.
There was a solution from the Labour Party here, the left-wing party, who proposed that we should put the United States on the same ban list that we put countries like Belarus, meaning that we wouldn't sell them riot gear to combat riots, because there's some kind of totalitarian state.
Cuba?
I think Cuba's on the list as well. I think Russia, China, countries that murder their protesters en masse on a regular basis. So,
but George Floyd wasn't a protester.
No, this was in response to the protest. Well, protests, the mostly peaceful protests.
Yeah, they weren't protests, they were riots. Like, I'm sorry, I don't think the United States has actually done anything wrong here. And the thing is, like, the whole thing with George Floyd is like, it's assumed that Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, he did something racist. But if you watch the body cam footage, like, George Floyd sat in the police car saying, "Can you lie me down? I can't breathe," before the guy, for some reason, puts his knee on his back. And I agree, that's a terrible thing to do. Well, like, there's no need for that. But like, there's no evidence that this was a racist attack or a racially motivated thing. And he did have a ridiculous dose of fentanyl in his system. So it's
the only evidence of racism is that the officer was white and the victim was black. It's like, okay,
but that's not evidence of racism.
Yeah. The fentanyl thing is what's being argued in court now because footage surfaced of just before he's approached by the officer. He puts some kind of white pill or substance in his mouth, and they believe that's fentanyl, and he overdosed. So it may be that he didn't actually die of asphyxiation, which is to be proven in court. But that's what's going on there. But the other point there, I don't know if I'm going to get flack for saying this, but it's the truth whether you like it or not. I was really critical of the idea of using chokeholds. So using a guy hold down his neck. I thought it was, how can the Americans do this? It seems disgusting. And I assumed the British police didn't do it. So I looked into it, and no, we do. But it's only for extreme circumstances. So if you have a suspect who's actively trying to resist, is probably a threat to you as soon as they get up, then you're allowed to use it. And in the context of America, I can imagine the reason it's widespread is because of the prevalence of gun ownership. I mean, if a suspect gets up and gets a gun, you're dead. So I don't want to be like, okay, the chokeholds are generally not preferable, but they are going to be part of policing. So anyway, but I wanted to mention that. So the other part of this celebration that made absolutely no sense was the fact that Auld Lang Syne wasn't even sung. It wasn't one of the tracks that was played. In which case, like, that's the whole point of the celebration. Auld Lang Syne, New Year, that's the theme. But you didn't do that. You instead did something political. Telling. So he also tags in that tweet a guy called George the Poet. And I decided to look up George the Poet because I don't know anything about the guy. I'm sure he's nice. But why was he tagged out of interest? So the quote at the start, the sort of rhyming stuff, was from George the Poet. And I assume Sadiq Khan knows the guy. And he's got 434 followers on Twitter and describes his podcast as the multi-award-winning podcast of such and such. Have you heard George's podcast?
George the Poet?
Yes.
I'm looking now. It says 71,000.
Not on his Twitter account that I got it off. But anyway, on his Instagram, he's got 90,000 followers and whatnot. So, yeah, okay. Fairly reasonable guy, but in size, but not massive. I also looked up the Daily Mail were quite rude about him. They said he was famous for turning down an OBE last year due to the, quote, pure evil of the British Empire. So,
yes.
Weird.
Yes, that's how I learned about this chap.
Yeah. But the narrative obviously here is one of oppression or one of, fighting the power, that kind of thing. But I just checked out his Instagram, and the first thing I noticed was this image, if you can get up, image 00. Just him working with YouTube. He's got a partnership with YouTube for Black History Month. I'm like, okay,
fighting the power.
That's pretty privileged of you. Like, I can't even get an explanation from YouTube as to why our video about Antifa is locked to 18 plus, but you've got enough contacts to get a partnership with them. Okay, fine.
Why are we trying to give OBEs to people who fundamentally hate Britain, though? Like, why would we reward someone who's literally like, no, you're an evil empire and I hate everything about you? Why would we do that?
You tell me. I mean, why hasn't Nigel Farage got a knighthood or an award or something?
Yeah.
It's because it's not about what you've done for the country. It seems to be.
And what has this guy done for the country?
So I checked out his podcast, which is on the BBC. So I assume it's either funded by the BBC if you can get it up. The podcast, I watched one episode. I maybe he's good. Maybe he's doing stuff that you love, and sure, you enjoy it. But I watched this one, and it was mostly a tirade against Ronald Reagan, which of course it was. And
timely.
The point is, should the BBC be funding this? Should they be going out of the way to create this sort of thing? Well, probably not. Probably this is expressly political, or is a thing that's not what the license payers want to pay for. I mean, I don't know how many views it's got, but I can't imagine that many in comparison to what the BBC is meant to be doing, what people at least agree on with the BBC, which is reporting news. And the point here is that this guy, okay, if you're able to get a podcast, funded or at least in partnership with the BBC, you've got a partnership with YouTube, you're getting retweeted by the Mayor of London. Pretty privileged position, I would say. Like, you seem to be in the halls of power and influence and in the structures of Britain. So the Daily Mail also wrote an article talking about... sorry, no, that's later. So this is the Guardian just talking about the celebration. So this isn't the first time Sadiq Khan's done this. So 2 years ago, he also lit up a bunch of lights to be the colour of the EU flag with the countdown, because Brexit was still going on. He's a massive Remainer. So he again hijacked the event to make it political. Whereas for the last 20 years beforehand, it had been about raising money for a natural disaster sometimes, or, things that weren't inherently bipartisan. The biggest outrage was when Boris Johnson made people pay to go and see it, which, seems reasonable. Why should everyone in London have to pay for something that not everyone enjoys? If you want to see the fireworks, pay to see the fireworks. Again,
another expressly partisan message. Lighting up the London Eye in the blue and yellow colours of the EU flag after the majority of the country has voted to leave the EU. Talk about hashtag sore loser. Where's Walmart now? Come on.
Yeah, the other thing he decided to do was say that London was open in his opening statement, which was then translated into French, German, Italian, Polish, Romanian, and Spanish just after midnight, which I guess is, people are inferring, and I think correctly, that that's also a hint at the fact that London should remain tied with the EU or will have some partnership with the EU, because it is a highly Remainer place.
He's probably expressly stated as such.
Yeah, well, he himself is, and he's the mayor.
Yeah. He's a proud European, after all.
And the inappropriate thing is obviously it's taxpayer funded. Even with people paying, it still costs £2.3 million from the authority. So that's £2.3 million of London taxpayers' money to pay for propaganda.
Well, they voted for him. They deserve what they get.
Yeah, I guess so. So the Daily Mail issued some criticism about all this, the most recent one with the BLM stuff. And their criticism seems largely on point, that you shouldn't be doing this. You apparently worked behind the scenes with the BBC and the Met Police to keep it a secret, and then it would be a big surprise for the day. And that tells me that you probably knew you shouldn't be doing it. If you got this much criticism just for the EU stuff, you knew you shouldn't be doing this. But his response to the criticism is very telling. So he decided to retweet the article with anyone else think it was pretty good. Thinking face. It's like, okay.
So 65,000 people on Twitter thought it was good, Sadiq. Is that a win? Is that you winning there, Sadiq? Now we're out of the European Union. Majority of Britain doesn't agree with you. And not only that, there's a huge pushback towards Black Lives Matter and wokeism anyway. This is happening in football stadiums all across the country, isn't it? Where they're complaining and objecting and booing for footballers who are taking a knee for Black Lives Matter and things like this. So, okay, you deliberately chose something incredibly divisive, and you don't care that they are bothered by this.
Yeah, look at the wording there. Anyone else think it was pretty good? He's just looking, is this entertainment value? That's not the complaint. That's not addressing the criticism at all. The criticism is you're being highly partisan with taxpayers' money, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Yes.
But no, it was any good. And it's this point of it's just activists going into spaces like these fireworks were never expressly political, and just making them expressly political, because that's all that socialists do. They just weasel their way in the same way with Gamergate. But the Black Lives Matter movement, I wanted to reflect on the fact that they've done this so much this year that I think it's actually massively backfired, and that's good. That, yeah, also just here, 3 rush to hospital minutes into New Year's after London stabbings. Like, yeah, of all the things for the London mayor to be concerned with, he's concerned with propagandizing the people of London rather than dealing with the issues.
And I think it's worth noting that Sadiq Khan directly contributes to the increased number of stabbings in London after Boris was the mayor, in fact. Because Boris had stop and search, which, as with Rudy Giuliani in New York, reduced the number of stabbings and murders on the streets of London. And Sadiq Khan expressly came in 2015. He was campaigning, and I remember it very, very clearly because he was saying things like, stop and search is racist. We're going to put an end to stop and search. And the crime rate and the stabbings just started skyrocketing again, and now he's had to bring it back. So you are in part responsible for this, Sadiq.
Yep. But I wanted to get more into this because it's the fact that this poor oppressed movement of BLM. Oh my god! I mean, how are they going to get anywhere? All the backing they've got, but it's the propagandizing as well, which is I think a net positive for our side of it, the non-Marxists, because it seems to not work. So if you can get the Polygon article up. So this is just Call of Duty Warzone. I was at my brother's playing this a while back when BLM blew up. And if you can scroll down, eventually there's a black screen I just want to show. Like when you log into the game, that one. Like you're loading the game, they have this screen up saying Black Lives Matter and then a message of support and all the rest of it. And there's no way of turning it off, there's no way of getting around it. You just have to stare at that while you're waiting for it to load. Which, why? Why do you have to do this? And it's obviously because it's people within the company wanting to push a political agenda. And they're forcing it into a space where it's not meant to be political. You know, you can have a million arguments about Call of Duty being partisan for this, that, and the other, but this was the problem with Gamergate, trying to push through politics, feminism at the time, but now similar with Black Lives Matter. But it's not just limited to the online sphere or the gamer sphere or anything like that. If you get, we'll get NonceFlix up. I'm never calling them Netflix again. They are definitely NonceFlix for the rest of time for what they did with cuties. But they had a similar thing where you had a Black Lives Matter section set up for Black Lives Matter films, which seems weirdly segregationist, but okay, Netflix, if that's how you want to do things.
I mean, look at the titles of these, like "Dear White People," "When They See Us." Like, what are you talking about? You know, like, I don't know, man. It's so foreign.
Yeah, I mean, it's all American as well. That's the thing. The uniquely difficult part for people in other parts of the world. Like, American politics are not universal. They are specific to America. But if you can get the first image up in the images, I noticed, because I was watching football a lot, because my family like football, and I noticed that on Sky News you can actually see a little Black Lives Matter logo at the top there, next to the score, which just is randomly coming up, and it's like, okay, that's creepy. Like it doesn't feel right at all. But it gets worse. There's the next one. Whenever you get near the goalposts, you can see how they change the seats to have messages. Near the goalposts, both sides, Black Lives Matter.
Just visit Rwanda. Okay.
But, someone's paid for that. But the Black Lives Matter thing, I think, is free, done by the clubs and whatnot. And this is what I mean by the propagandizing. It's getting into people who don't want to be in political spaces are being forced into political spaces. And it's having the opposite effect I think these people want. And I just wanted to mention here, in case you're wondering why Sky Sports is doing this, of all places, it's because they're owned by Comcast. And if you can get Comcast up, Comcast, same company to make MSNBC, very woke. They also put out a message of support for Black Lives Matter at the time. They actually went further. They did some messed up stuff. So there was a lobbyist working for them. And because he was critical, they fired him just for that. So if you can get the next one. So the quote here is, he accused Black Lives Matter of being hostile to families, capitalism, cops, unborn life, and gender.
All true. All true. Every single allegation there is true. And Black Lives Matter even had it on their website that the nuclear family was the problem, that capitalism is the problem, of course, police, and naturally, because they're an intersectional commie movement, they're concerned about gender and abortion as well.
Yeah, so it's like,
you wouldn't think they
it's
would.
not even an accusation, like they would tell you that.
No, this is just what they come out and say. This was on their website.
Yeah, but the next thing they also did was provide $100 million for, as they quoted, a plan to support social justice and equality. I'm just reminded of all the people laughing back in the day, like the social justice warriors and social justice movement. It's not getting anywhere, is it? It's like, okay, I wish I had $100 million. But
I wish I had the kind of connections that George the poet has. I wish I was being given an OBE to my services for the British Empire.
That you could turn
down.
No,
I'm ignored. This is terrible.
Yeah,
Nigel Farage can't even get a bloody knighthood.
So I also just decided to Google images on Google Images, a list of companies that support Black Lives Matter, and this was one of them that came up. And you can see some of the companies there: McDonald's, Google, Netflix, Disney, Amazon. I mean, I haven't had the time to add it all up, but I bet this is probably at least like, 10, 20, 30% of the US economy? It's a ridiculous amount. And that's obviously not all of them. We didn't know.
I mean, we're talking about literally Google, the largest company on earth.
Yeah,
like
Apple is probably
of the
second.
Internet.
Is Apple second?
Yeah. No, I think YouTube's second. But Apple's certainly a close third, I think.
YouTube's up there as well.
Disney, Amazon, Cisco. Like, these are huge companies. Intel. Like, this is mad. It's mad the amount of support they have, and they're claiming to be the oppressed, marginalized minority. It's like,
Yeah, obviously
great.
absurd. And there's just this meme that went around at the time I wanted to show as well. If you can get the next one, John. Oh my god, I'm so oppressed with, Black Lives Matter symbols everywhere, posted by literally everyone in every corporation. Because this is the truth. And you don't have to keep that up. It's just to get across the message. And how can you be this well connected, like George the Poet? How can you have this much backing, this much money, this much support from everyone and their mother, to the point where they're propagandizing their own people in, football or games or TV, every industry you can think of, explicitly just to support you, and still think of yourselves as the oppressed movement of 2020, or the movement that was really fighting the power and is now won a victory? It's like, no, you are the most astroturf fake movement I can think of. Like, can you think of one that's more supported by every company on Earth?
No. No, I mean, Black Lives Matter is probably the most supported movement. And the thing is, as well, I posted this on Parler the other day. If I should have got this up, but if you go to the Google Trends and search for Black Lives Matter, you can see it spike just before U.S. presidential elections. In 2016, it's literally the month before. In 2020, it's literally the month before. There's a huge spike to it, and then it just disappears, totally flatlines. And this is what the Black Lives Matter activists should take away. They don't care about you at all. They think of you as useful idiots. You are something to be used and then discarded. That's how they view you. It's just the way it is, and it's the way it's always going to be.
But it's so obviously pathetic as well. Like, we already know by 2024 this is probably going to pop back up, and it'll be made a big deal again out of, something. Doesn't matter if it was racist or not. It will just be made the new thing for 2024's election, and how it'll be a big evidence of racial injustice. And in 2016, this movement was killed by the fact that one of their supporters went out and murdered, I think it was 8 cops in Dallas. Which just went out I think it was a Pan-African nationalist, but he was also a Black Lives Matter supporter, massive into the movement, and then just went out and killed people on the basis that cops are pigs. Okay, I mean, if that wasn't a red flag for you, that there's probably a problem with this movement, I don't know what would be. But it died after that. And then it came back, obviously, for the next election, because suddenly it's needed again. And this time round, what is it, 20, 30 people have died in those riots? But
Something like that.
But it's dispersed, so no one seems to care. Or at least none of the media want to talk about it. And I can't stand how people seem to think that this is some kind of oppressed movement, or is some kind of, we're really rising up, guys. It's like, you're already at the top. If you're pushing an open door, you're at the top. I don't know what to say.